Hello everyone, I'm Rachel and I'm here to talk to you about What the Best Teachers Do by Ken Bain, Chapter 2, What Do They Know About How We Learn? So Ken Bain starts this chapter by talking about some research that's surrounding how students and people are resistant to change and how they think and feel about fundamental ideas. And they used a research project by Hallen and Hestings that was done in the 1980s. There were two physicists who wanted to know how much information their students actually learned about Newton's laws of motions, and they discovered that their takeaway was not what they anticipated, and that students were able to take the information that they gleaned in class and transform it into ways that made it okay for them to understand and accept, but it was not accepting these new ideas that the physicists were trying to teach. So they discovered that people are resistant to change and to try to spice up their ways of thinking about ideas. So we start the chapter, talking about how we help our students allow new ideas to seep into their set of beliefs. So they have these core set of beliefs, they walk into your classroom. How do we help students work past those feelings and ideas and beliefs that are so important to them and motivate them to think beyond? So teachers who exact change in this way, Bain found, had three main characteristics. First, they know their disciplines well, and they're very active and accomplished in their field. Second, they understand that the history of their subject is important, and they also understand the history of their subject, and it allows for them to help their students develop metacognition about learning that subject by starting with the bigger picture questions that they had to begin with as students when they started studying whatever subject they are now masters of. And third, through their experiences as teachers, they have found and formed ideas of how their students travel through learning. And this travel has been broken down into four key concepts that you can see on the screen. So first, they talked about how knowledge is constructed and not received. So as humans, we continually construct our sense of reality from the input we receive each day, from the moment we get out of the crib, from the moment we're out of the womb, I should say, and out of the crib and out of the car and everywhere else. We are constantly constructing new knowledge from what we've received. It's not after we've learned something that we then develop a new idea. Our ideas are forming all the time based on the input that we receive from moment to moment. So that's the first thing that these professors understand about humans. Second, they know that in order to change mental models, it's going to take a slow process. And in order to do that, they have to help their students do the following things. Their students need to face a situation where their mental model doesn't work. They need to care that it doesn't work. So they will stop and deal with whatever uncomfortable feelings they're having about that mental model not working for them anymore. And third, they need to be able to handle the emotional trauma of challenging a long-standing belief. And once those three things happen, then the student is in line to actually change how they think or feel about a certain topic. On top of dealing with knowledge as construction, not received, and mental models change slowly, the other thing that Bain suggests is that questions are crucial. In fact, he says that we must ask questions until we ask the right question. Then our memory will know where to index the answer. So constantly asking questions, getting them to those answers that we want them to find, helping them find new questions of their own to build on those ideas. And finally, the students must actually care about the material in order for deep learning to occur. So in order to do this, teachers can set up their classroom in a variety of ways. First, they can craft class and assignments so that students try their own thinking. Then they can create a safe space and develop a scaffolding on which students can build these new ideas and feel okay about trying these new ideas. They also need to try to understand the students' mental models as they currently are and the emotional baggage that's attached to them. And then they need to listen to their student conceptions before challenging them and ask questions instead of telling students that they are right or wrong. So how do these students make all that happen and how do those teachers help their students get motivated to reach these next levels of learning? So Bain talks about a variety of different ways that these master teachers that he researched found to motivate their students. So first they talked about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So we know that subjects lose their intrinsic fascination if an extrinsic motivation is introduced and then taken away, or even introduced at all. So for example, you want your kids to do chores. Chores is a bad example. Let's say you want your kids to practice their instrument, and you say you're going to pay them to practice their instrument. So you do, and then after a while you're like, I shouldn't have to pay my kid to practice their instrument, so you stop. Guess what's going to happen? Your kid's going to stop practicing their instrument. We have to find a way to motivate our students to practice from the inside. They need to want to do it. We shouldn't have to provide the motivation. So people lose motivation when they feel like they're being manipulated, and only verbal praise or social approval seem to work and are not perceived as controlling behavior. So the way we can motivate people with extrinsic motivation, the only way that really works is through verbal praise and social approval. So speaking of praise, then Bain goes on to talk about person praise versus task praise. So person praise is where the person is appraised for what happened. So you are so smart for coloring your coloring book purple. You are such an intelligent person. Versus task praise just talks about how you enjoy the task that they did and how you perceive that task. So, wow, I love how this page is purple. What a cool idea. By praising the task, you are allowing the student to push themselves to think about higher levels of learning. Ooh, maybe next time I'll color the page blue. Maybe next time I'll try it multiple colors. Versus if you praise the person, you were so smart for doing that. It puts a limit on what intelligence is perceived by that person. So children who are praised with person praise often find that intelligence is fixed in their mind rather than expandable with hard work. So they're inclined not to push themselves to do more hard work because they've already reached their level of intelligence. They don't want to go any further. Master teachers try to avoid extrinsic motivators and foster intrinsic ones. Richard Light did a study that reported findings describing highly respected courses that had high demands, but also many opportunities to revise and improve one's work, thus creating opportunities for students to learn from their mistakes. So in this particular study, opportunities to make mistakes and then revise and improve offers that intrinsic motivation, again, for students to push themselves to get better and better. And finally, promises and invitation. Many teachers on the very first day of school, when they're setting up the whole outline of their course, they make promises to their students that they're going to challenge their students, they're going to invite their students to learn new things, to help the professor learn new things together, to explore a subject together, as opposed to just listing requirements and demands. When we just list requirements and demands, these are again extrinsic motivators. We'll get the grade done, we'll get the grade that we want, but are we really seeking the true knowledge? So then we get to who gives a damn. Donald Sari of the University of California, he's a mathematician there. He uses this specific style to promise his students that they can ask a question of him at any time in his lecture, day, minute, down to the most infinitesimal thing to talk about. He says, you have the opportunity to ask who gives a damn about what I'm talking about. And he guarantees, he makes the promise that he'll make sure that he'll tie in whatever they're talking about into the bigger questions that they're discovering as a class and why what he's talking about is significant to their course of subject. Teachers also find that students connect more and feel like they give a damn when the teachers share personal stories or anecdotes that can be motivating. And they also understand that they're motivating 3 different types of learners at any different time. So they're motivating the deep learners, the people who enjoy mastering something. They're trying to motivate strategic learners, people who learn for the test. And these were also labeled as bulimic learners because they are receiving a feast of information and just regurgitating information. Thought that was a very interesting term. And then they're also trying to motivate performance avoiders. And these are people who want to avoid failure at all costs. They only want to do what they know they will succeed at. So Perry and Clinchley at Wellesley College suggest that 4 categories of learning that students travel through as they transform their levels of knowing in regards to a specific topic. So students can travel back and forth throughout these levels of learning. So they're not just linear. There are fluid developmental stages of learning and levels of knowing. So the first level is called received knowers. And these are the students that can ingest the knowledge but can't process it yet. Sometimes Bain referred to this as the banking model, where teachers deposit the correct answers into the students' heads for hopefully later interest building. Number 2, subjective knowers are people who understand that knowledge is a matter of opinion. So an idea is right if it feels right. Use the example of a student receiving a bad grade. So the student receives a bad grade on a paper and they say, well, I received that bad grade because the professor didn't agree with my opinion. So they are a subjective knower. Third, procedural knowers, they know how to play the game, and they are oftentimes your most sharpest students in the class. They understand how to play the game, but the knowing that they glean within the class doesn't necessarily influence how they think outside of class. The ultimate level that we want to receive is the commitment level of learning. And this has been divided by Bain into 2 components. First, there's separate knowers and connected knowers. So separate knowers detach themselves from an idea, and they remain objective or even sometimes skeptical, always ready to argue about that idea. Oftentimes, these are more competitive people, and they really enjoy having that debate about an idea. Versus connected knowers, they purposely seek out the merits of other arguments and try to bias themselves in favor of the idea that they are studying. So these people they are empaths who are finding ways to make connections with other people and other ideas. People develop in fits and starts and benefit from repeated challenges from a variety of levels. So this is what Bain says. In addition, every student in your class is at a different level from everyone else, and the great teacher works to understand where everyone is so he or she can anticipate the student's response as they are challenged to travel to deeper levels of knowing. So Bain says, teach your students first, not just the subject, and then be prepared to lead them to care enough to question themselves. So as you're thinking about this chapter and as we're preparing for Thursday, I'd like for you to first identify one professor who helped you approach learning in such a way that you changed your fundamental thinking about that subject. How did he or she help you through that process? And then, how will you help your students achieve the same levels of high learning that you experienced with that professor? I have a specific task that I'd like your advice on, and I will bring that to class. So be thinking about strategies for helping students reach higher levels of learning and how we can motivate them to get there.